Hello and welcome to Roni Programs. Today we're going to be taking on a couple stories related to the start screen graphics, so improving the graphics of this initial start screen, as well as creating kind of like a screen itself, so having like a fixed width, a fixed height, a border, that kind of thing. So let's get started with this first story, start screen graphics. So the first thing that we have to do is we want to show the original Pokemon logo, version name, and copyright on the start screen, as well as a picture of the player and the Pokemon Charmander. Right now we're just displaying this Pokemon header. And so the first thing that we'll want to do is display a logo instead. So I've actually gathered some images that we can use for today's stories. And the first thing we'll do is render that Pokemon logo. I do want to call attention, however, to the fact that we have a test that is checking for the Pokemon heading to be in the document. So before we actually make this change, let's update our test to more accurately reflect the functionality. And we want the Pokemon logo to be the Pokemon logo image to be in the document. So first, let's update our test. We see we have a failing test, and now the next thing we can do is go ahead and render that image. So we're going to render an image with the source, say Pokemon logo, and the alt text, we can say Pokemon logo. So Pokemon logo we can import from that images directory that I just quickly hinted at before. Then we have a file called Pokemon logo PNG. Whoops, this is just a default import. By the way, I meant to call this out at the beginning of the video. You'll notice that today I have the editor and the browser split in one screen. That's because today's changes are going to be highly visual, and I wanted to, as I make changes, have them reflect on the screen so that I can see better and that you all can see better as we make changes. We're not going to be writing any kind of, and there we have the logo. So we're not going to be writing any kind of like tests necessarily against like the layout, like testing that the layout looks correct. In the future, we could incorporate something like Storybook and have a visual diffing system to make sure that our changes don't break existing diffs. But for now, I think it's too early to commit to that kind of thing. So let's just continue on. So the next thing we want to show is the version name. Oh, and by the way, we have kind of a guideline for how the layout should appear. So we actually noticed that before the logo, there's an 8-pixel spacer. And so to simulate something like that, we can simply just add a margin top to this thing. So we'll just add an 8-pixel margin top. That looks good. And I did want to check just one thing. Sometimes images can get weird when you add margins to them. If they're inline block, I think we may have some problems as we start to build out the layout, but let's see. The next thing we want to show is the version name. So, okay, so right now we're showing red version as a heading, and we actually have some tests, or we have at least one test that checks that. So instead of there being a red version heading, we want to show the red version image. So let's just update our test. And now we can render an image, red version. We also have a PNG for this. Images, start screen, red version, PNG. Now you'll notice I separated the images into a separate images directory. Given that our components don't have a whole lot of structure, I may move these into a directory with the start screen component, but I thought this was the simplest way I could kind of bring these images in for now. So now you'll see we have the red version appearing, and it's not, it's not necessarily laid out in the correct way, but we'll get to that later. After the version name, we have an 8-pixel spacer and a Pokemon next to the player. And the Pokemon in particular we're going to show is Charmander. So let's do that part. So let's say we have a div here, and the reason we're going to have a div is because we're going to show these two items in a line, so the Charmander and then the player. So the first thing we can do is create an image for Charmander, something like that. And then we can create one for the player as well. And we can go ahead and import Charmander and player from their respective files. Let's save that. Yes, Charmander is actually in a separate directory, /Pokemon /front/Charmander. Awesome. So this is looking closer and closer to the real thing the more we go. And then finally, we want to show the copyright. So let's add one more element. Copyright. That's also in the start screen directory. Copyright. Okay, cool. So far pretty trivial changes. We're just showing a couple images on the screen. We do want it to, so the layout should mirror the appearance in the original game. So we want to make sure that these items are laid out correctly. The first thing I want to do is show, so you see that these two images are rendering in a line like this. The first thing I want to do is go to my index CSS. And in general, I don't like that images are displayed as inline block. It's typically not the behavior I want. So I'm going to go ahead and show images as a block. So now we have red version on a separate line. We'll deal with the Pokemon and player on a separate line in a sec. But that's the first thing I want to do. What's next? Okay, so we didn't add a spacer. I just remembered there's a spacer before the Pokemon next to player. So in this div, we're going to add another margin top of 8 pixels. Okay, just to give us a little more space there and align it to the original version. So what shall we do next? Well, we could center this because right now the content looks a little weird to how it's all to the left. So let's go ahead and create a, make this a flex display, and we can make it actually a flex column since the items are going top to bottom. Our images are going to blow up huge, and that's because we haven't specified an alignment. So if we align items to center, then everything will be centered. You'll see that actually the whole kind of screen has been centered. That's fine for now because we haven't given this container a fixed width. If we wanted to, we could say, you know, it's a fixed width of 160 and center it, and then it would go off to the left over here. But this is fine for now. Cool. So the only thing left to do is to get the player and Charmander kind of on the same line and formatted in a nice way. So your first thought might be, you know, we could do like a flex row and show them side by side. So in the original kind of layout of this game, the Pokemon and the player actually overlap. And I've been thinking about this offline, and I was trying to come up with a good solution, and I realized it was a lot trickier than I thought it would be. But I kind of have an idea that I want to try out. So what I'm proposing is that the player is always 56, or the player is 56 pixels tall, and the maximum height that a Pokemon will be is also 56 pixels. But Charmander, for example, is only 40 pixels tall. So in order to preserve enough room for like vertically for these images, we're going to show the player as is, but we're going to show the Pokemon, in this case Charmander, we're going to render it as an absolute position. And so we have several things to correct here, but what's good about this is we can now position them independently and have them overlap and use nice values. I guess it's hard to explain why I came to this decision without knowing the other things I tried, but I tried things like flex rows. I tried things basically the only solution I was able to find that was working for me was this absolute positioning. So anyways, let's keep going. So the first thing you'll notice is when I absolute position any element, it's going to basically not be where I want it to be. So the first thing I notice is that Charmander is not aligned to the bottom left corner of the player image. So that's the first thing I want to fix. I want Charmander to be on the bottom. So I could say bottom 0 and align it to the bottom. This isn't actually going to work because it's going to align it to the bottom of the window, but what we want it is to align it to the bottom of this div. And in order to do that, we basically just have to say that this is going to be a relatively positioned div. And let's actually keep these in alphabetical order. And now I've got Charmander aligned to the bottom left of the player there. Cool. So stage that. We're almost there. The next thing we want to go ahead and do is move the player. And so just kind of like I basically just manually compared different pixel values to the original, and what I found was that the player is 22 pixels left of center. And so because the image is centered in this flex div, we actually have to double that distance, because there's going to be, if you think about like 22 pixels padding, it's going to try to still center it with that 22 pixels. And so there will be 11 on the left, 11 on the right. We need to double the value so that red is actually pushed over 22 pixels. So that basically just translates to having a padding on the player of double the amount we want to center it. And by the way, I think I said centered left. I meant 22 pixels center of right of center. So we're going to add a left padding, double the amount that we want. And now we see basically the way I was checking it is that red's foot should be 2 pixels left of this F. It's really hard to tell without going into the inspector, but that's the sort of the padding we want there. And then finally for Charmander, the value that I found works for where the Pokemon are is setting the left to be 10 pixels. Something like that. Okay, so now you'll notice that we've got kind of a glaring issue, which is that these images have white backgrounds, and so when they overlap like this, it cuts off. One of the images will be cut off. And so short of basically implementing some kind of program and removing these white backgrounds, creating transparent alpha channels, what I decided to do instead was a little bit of, or what I thought about doing, which I tried out and it worked okay, is a CSS hack. Not really a hack, but there's a new, I don't know what you want to call it, but like a new property that allows you to basically, if you want to think about it as like merging colors together, and that's mix blend mode. So we can say mix blend mode multiply. And you'll notice now that when I save this, the colors will sort of mix together. And so if I take this away, you can think about it as like this white right here is going to mix with the kind of grayish, like the blacks and the grays and the light grays, and create kind of the it is a little hard to explain. The documentation is pretty complex, but anyways, just know that this is kind of like an easy way for us to have these white backgrounds and to be able to basically blend the sprites together. So it's not going to be a pixel perfect copy of the original. To do that, we'd have to do some kind of cleverness. I think the original game treats all white as transparent. So like when this Charmander animates in, or like when other Pokemon animate in, you can actually see it through all the white parts on red. So that's something interesting I learned. So let's see, are we done here? We have a start screen that looks strikingly similar to the original. We've got all the acceptance criteria met. So I'm gonna say, and you know, this is our regular game. It's we sort of got an issue now where like the menu jumps over here and all that kind of stuff. But for for now, I think this is pretty good. So we can go ahead and mark this as done, and we're going to commit this feature. This is going to be start screen graphics. And finally, we can jump to this next story. So this is also going to be a pretty short one. Basically, we just want to create a fixed width and height for the screen with some kind of black border. We want to center it vertically and horizontally. I'm going to say something like, in the window, on the page, whatever. And we'll get to this, but you'll notice if I kind of zoom in, the quality of these PNGs is not super great. So we're going to increase the sharpness of those. Possibly having like an optional toggle in the future. But anyways, let's go on to the first part of the story, which is creating a screen. So in our app, let's go ahead and imagine we have a screen component, something like that. And we can, if we want, we can pass a width and height, but let's just say that the screen is going to handle how big the viewport's going to be. So let's say we have a screen component. And what is this going to do? Well, maybe for now we can just return the children. And we will import this. So right now nothing should be changed. Cool. So let's see. So the screen is 160 pixels wide and 144 pixels tall. So let's just create a div that is 144 pixels tall and 160 pixels wide. We'll save that. So now we can see that since this screen has a fixed width and, well, really just a fixed width, it's going to center the content on the start menu, but the container itself is going to be left aligned to the page. That's kind of what I was hinting at earlier. So to prove that our screen is the width and height we say it is, we're going to create a border around the screen. So let me go back to our view here, and we can say we have a solid black border, 2 pixels thick. There's our lovely border. That's looking great. The next thing is the images, or the screen is centered vertically and horizontally in the window. Okay, so what that means for us is that we probably want to, how would it best make sense to do this? I think what would make the most sense, this is just me playing around, is to actually set some attributes on the body. So the first thing is that the height of this application, we're basically just making it the max height. Furthermore, we're going to make this a flex container to allow us to easily center stuff. We're going to justify it centered so that it's now centered horizontally. And now we're going to center it vertically via align items. And boom, now our game is centered in the screen vertically and horizontally. You can see the controls have been also centered, and that's because all of the content has been centered. If we want, we could go ahead and fix that. In fact, we might as well. Just setting left 0 on controls. So now our controls are back where they were. Eventually we might figure out a more elegant way to show the controls. But now we have this very nicely centered screen. And then images on the screen should be pixelated to improve the render quality. So I'm going to zoom in to really give you an appreciation for how we're going to render images. So we can say image rendering is going to be pixelated because we have PNGs that are just that are meant to be shown as pixelated and not meant to be rasterized or anything like that. So just here's the before and here's the after, and you can see the difference in sharpness there. So again, before, after. I might make this kind of like an option you can turn on and off if you want it pixelated or if you want it the default, whatever the default is. We could even there are actually other options just for fun. Let's see what those options are. So there's pixelated. There's there's really not that many options. Okay, well what's WebKit optimized contrast? What was that one? Okay, well anyways, we'll just know that we have pixelated rendering for now. That looks good. So the last thing I thought about doing, just for fun, sorry for the background noise by the way, but yeah, what we can do for fun, I didn't have this in the story, but we can make the screen bigger because this is pretty tiny, especially like, our little player sprite. Again, this is something we could always configure later, but in the screen component, I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit. So this is not necessarily the way we'll do it in the long term, but this is a really easy way for us to increase the size of everything that we're building inside of the screen and inside of the game. We're just going to scale everything up by, let's try 2.5 and see how that works. So I'm going to save. That's going to blow up our screen. And now you can see like the text is getting bigger. Like everything inside the screen is going to be increased by a factor of 2.5. But this is just, I think, a nice starting place for like the general size of the game. I think let's even see if is 3 too big. 3 might be a little too big. We can even try 2. 2's a little small. We can play around with it. It'd be cool if we had like a slider that allowed you to, increase the scale of the game, that kind of thing. Maybe we'll make that a feature in the future. So that's it. We have a screen, and we can mark this as done. And yeah, this is already starting to look a heck of a lot better. Obviously, we have a long way to go. We still have this, list menu. We don't have the real graphics for yet, but I think the start screen is looking great. I'm going to go ahead and commit this as feature screen. And with that said, I'll see y'all in the next episode. Thanks for watching.